In this video, I'm going to be building this outdoor tool chest. It's not only an outdoor storage place for a wide variety of tools, but can also quickly become a workstation. Of course, I have a shop with plenty of space for my tools and working on projects, but I know a lot of you don't. So this is a solution where you can build it on the side of your house or in a backyard and have a dedicated space for your projects. It has a lid that rises up and stays up, 2 front doors that has additional hanging space for things, an inside workbench area, then also plenty of area for custom shelving to meet your specific needs. Let me show you how to build it. I spent the first few hours of this project just cutting all of my material. I have a full set of plans that comes with a cut list of every part needed. So I wheeled my armor workbench over to my miter saw, flipped out the wings, and started chopping. If you're interested in a set of plans, they are available over on my website. I line my workbench up on the side so that I can pull my material directly off and onto my miter. After it was all said and done, I had a pretty good assortment of material. Maybe I should have actually labeled the parts as I went, but oh well, lesson learned. After cutting all of the dimensional lumber needed, I next started cutting all of my sheet good pieces that were needed. You can see I'm once again utilizing my armor bench for transportation help here. I made the height of it the same as my workbench to make this go smooth. I brought out my Triton track saw to cut everything down. I'll be using plywood for the base and smart side for the walls. If you're looking at a good respirator, then check out the one I'm wearing here made by Stealth Mask. It's not only easy to put on and take off, but it's very comfortable. Using a track saw makes quick work of cutting down the sheet goods. Now let's start assembling. I started with the deck. Since this will be close to the ground, all of these parts are made from pressure treated wood. I started by laying out my boards, then screwing things together. To make placing the studs quick but accurate, I cut a spacer to the needed length and moved that along as I was assembling. After attaching the top and bottom plate, I grabbed a sheet of plywood for the decking and popped it in place. The day I was building this, it was actually raining, but instead of wasting the day, I decided to build all the parts needed, but then set them aside to throw together on a clear day. With that, I moved the deck off the bench, then started on building what will be the back wall. On this wall, I switched over to using a nail gun, and this really speeds things up if you have one around. If not, there is nothing wrong with sticking with screws. You can again see that I'm using a spacer to make locating the position of the horizontal short 2x4s easier. I placed it on one side, then after securing it, moved it over to the other side. On the next 2x4, I no longer have the availability to face nail, so I threw in a few toenails. Next, I brought in the siding and attached it. With this wall being so wide, it requires 2 pieces to make it up. The overlap is placed in the center, and each was cut so that one side has the tongue and the other side has the groove. You'll also notice that I'm switching to a coil nailer here when attaching the siding. If you're curious, there's no reason for this other than I didn't have shorter nails for my other gun. Before moving on, there is one more component to this wall, which is a ripped 2x4 piece that goes along the top and will eventually have hinges that attach the roof to the body. I did this by setting the depth of the bit to the depth of my hinges, then routed the location. Next, I attached it to the top of the back wall. I used a brad nail to stick it temporarily in place so I wouldn't have to hold it while driving in screws. I went ahead and pre-drilled here to prevent splitting. Once again, let's clear the bench and start again. This time I'm laying out my material to make up the 2 side walls. These parts are mirrored, not identical, which can be a trip up if you're not paying attention. To prevent mistakes, I always lay out my wall first to dry test fit stuff. This allows me to check links are correct and also direction of angles, which so many pieces on these walls have. Once it looks good, I use my nail gun to attach it all together. And on my workbench. I'll fix that. Once I got the frame correct, I dropped the siding in place to be attached. Attaching the siding before assembling can be tricky because there's always overhangs on certain sides. So I'm always paying attention to the orientation of the wall and which side needs to be flush when attached and which side needs to be overhanging. With the wall built, next I mortised out for the hinges where the doors will later be attached. Then attach the hinges in place. I again moved those aside and started on the last large pieces, which are the doors. These are very simple construction of an outer frame that is screwed together, then siding attached to one side. I recommend attaching the siding flush to one side first, then pulling or pushing the siding so that it's flush to the other. This will square up the walls without you having to pull diagonal measurements. From starting to cut to now took a single day, which isn't bad, I think. In real time, I had to wait days for the weather to clear up. But eventually the sun came back out and I was able to start moving all of these pieces to the yard to start assembling. You can see I set pavers down on the ground first, making sure that they were not only level but also square, so that the deck could be placed directly on top and flushed up to the front edge of all 3 pavers. This is heavy, so I suggest grabbing a friend. Okay, now let's add the back wall. This wall is directional by not only the upper 2x4 blockings, but also the bottom has the siding overhanging so that when it's placed on the deck, the siding extends down past it. It should fit perfectly, and since it does, I attached it to the deck with nails. Next thing to add is the workbench / top shelf piece of the unit. Kickstand. I first made a kickstand to assist in holding it up, and this is just made from some scrap cut to length. I needed it in the center and then flipped, or maybe dropped is a more accurate word here, into place. I didn't break it. After attaching this down to the back wall, I started adding the sidewalls. Again, these have the overhanging siding that creates a catch at the bottom. But the tricky part about these is the back stud of the sidewall slips into the workbench piece. Yeah. Oh, ow. Now you could make it easier on yourself and cut the slot an extra 1/8 of an inch wide, or you can cut it exactly 1.5 inches. In combination, body slam and Spartan kick the wall into place. Got it. It's up to you. Once they are both in place, the bottom can be secured to the deck with nails, but then when attaching them to the back wall, I switched to screws, just so that the hardware would actually squeeze it together while securing. After peppering the inside with screws, I also drove in a few from the outside. Okay, now let's square up the side walls. In the design, there is a diagonal piece that goes from each wall to the back wall. I would use a framing square on the front opening to get the wall square, then drive in screws to secure the wall in position. I recommend pre-drilling here because it does take both hands to get this done. After knocking out one side, I repeated on the other. Next, I added in another member to connect these 2 diagonals, then screwed down the workbench. Under the watchful eye of a supervisor, of course. Next up is attaching the roof. The roof is giant and heavy, so to make attaching it easier, I first grabbed the board from the lid that attaches to the hinges and attached it to the hinges first. This will make more sense in a few seconds, I think. Next, Jacob helped me carry out the large roof and set it in place. It should overhang on the 3 front sides. Then the back 2x that I just attached to the hinges slips right into the back of the framing on the lid. Now the lid can be attached to the 2x and everything will be connected. Since I backed mine up to the garden, I didn't have access to the back of the maker chest. So I ended up going through the goat fencing of my garden. Oh, and I forgot to show you the kickstand. I used my Triton jigsaw to cut out a quick notch in the side so that when the lid is lifted, it will pop into place and hold itself up. It's neat that that works. Now, you definitely could leave it as is. However, I bought some struts for mine to assist in the lifting and holding up part. These pop right into place on the silver hardware I attached when building out the wall. And it is incredible just how effective these are. So cool. That's like even cooler than what I was anticipating, guys. And then look, it completely holds itself up. For roofing material, you can go with anything of your choice, of course, but I went with simple metal panels. A trick is to use a panel to make a straight line on the panel you need to cut. And I'm using some crescent shears to chop through and went right in half to create pieces needed to cover this entire area. Locking feature there, spring loaded, help with fatigue. There's a serrated blade on the bottom. See how they cut. Oh, actually, before laying down the roofing, I added drip edge. After cutting the length needed, I used some nails to attach it in place on the front, right, and left edges. Next, the panels can be added directly on top. I used roofing screws to attach these panels and overlap them by 1 corrugation until the entire thing was covered. When it came time to attach the ridge cap, I once again ran into the issue of not having access to the back of the tool nook. So I popped back into the garden and stuck my hands through the fencing. This actually ended up hurting quite a bit by the middle. So on the second half, I switched my tactic and went up and over instead. This was not only good for a laugh, but was actually very effective. Okay, roof is done. Now let's attach some doors. This is simple enough. They get attached to the hinges on both side walls. Let's go ahead and stop and test it out. Man, I think this thing is so awesome. Let's go ahead and add a few more add-ons though to really finish it off. Work. Not drums, but that was like hammering, not drums. First up is a way to lock it up. If this thing is going to be outside and housing valuables, then adding a hasp will give you a way to throw a lock on it. Next is adding pegboard for easy hanging. I used my Triton track saw to cut 2 pieces the same size as the door, then screwed them to the inside framing. Now I'm only adding 1 shelf, but I recommend planning out what you want to house in here so that you can deck it out to meet your needs. As you can see, there is still plenty of room in here to add shelving. Jacob designed and built this for himself years ago because he didn't have a garage to work out of, and he used it for not only his tool storage space, but also his workshop. I think it is a brilliant idea that could be used for a wide variety of things, even outside of tools. On the doors, I added in some tough-built wall organizers so that I can easily and quickly hang my tool bags. Tough-built makes these clip-tech hubs, which means anywhere I place one of these hubs, I can place a bag. So I can take a bag off my belt and hang it within seconds, or vice versa. Also check the description for a link to ToughBuilt's website where you can explore not only their awesome clip-tech bags, but their other great products like these rugged sawhorses that have a 1,300 pound capacity and so many savvy built-in features that it will make you wonder how you got along without them. They have an anti-slip tape on top with the carrying handle, legs that can be adjusted individually, which takes out all of the struggle working on uneven ground, side jaws that can be pulled out to fit a 2x4 or 2x6 and turn the horses into a large work area. Then of course, the ability to compactly close and be tucked away until needed again. I want to say a big thank you to ToughBuilt for not only making great products that makes building easier, but also supporting what I do by sponsoring this video. Don't forget, if you want a set of plans for the backyard workstation or whatever it is that you want to call this thing, then I do have a set of plans available over on my website. It comes with a full cut list, material list, and step-by-step plans. I hope that you've enjoyed this one. I would love to hear your comments down below, and I'll see you on my next project. No!
Hope it falls back out.
Thank you. That's not nice. No! Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you would like another project to tackle, don't forget that I have templates for this folding Adirondack chair. Of course, it's an Adirondack chair, but then you can tuck it away into this nice sleek profile for either storing it during winter or just simply after a party. You can click right here to get your templates.